The systematic racism, zero tolerance policies, unwarranted disciplinary actions, and low expectations perpetuated on the melanated children by the education system causes these melanated children emotional and psychological trauma. Welcome to New Day Education Podcast. I'm your host, Shalimar K. Ali-L. The New Day Education Podcast was created to talk about all things related to educating melanated child, specifically those children who are identified as Black, African American, or members of the African diaspora. The topics I discuss on this podcast evolve from my own experiences, thoughts, and research. These topics authentically evolve from me, and I am not expressing the ideas, thoughts, or ideology expressed by other persons or groups. The things that I discuss on this podcast may trigger some people. If you are triggered by the topic or topics being discussed, you have the option to detach from the podcast and find something better to listen to that suits your fancy. If the messages shared on this podcast resonate with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, without further ado, let's jump in to our topic for today. The emotional and psychological trauma melanated children experience while being educated in the education system. In 2024, people will tell you that we have come a long way from the way things used to be. But have we really? In this class-based society in America, zero tolerance policies in schools allow schools to create excuses to give melanated students extended out-of-school suspensions and expulsions, while the police officers in the schools are policing the melanated students instead of protecting them. School policies and dress codes give the school space to put the melanated students out of school based on their self-expression through their wardrobe and or natural hair. And to add insult to injury, a great majority of classroom teachers are white women who fear melanated children, have low expectations for these students, feel threatened by these students, and cannot relate to the culture of these students to say the least. All of the aforementioned have a negative impact on the emotional and psychological well-being of melanated students. In 2022, an article written by Dr. Barbara titled Racism, Education, and Black Children's Mental Health. Dr. Barbara, who's an academic child psychiatrist, states the following. Children interact with multiple systems that impact their mental health. For example, they are cared for and guided by the educational system. But we have data showing that Black children are more likely to be negatively viewed by educators and school administrators than white children. This phenomenon, coupled with structural racism, results in the increased use of punitive measures when addressing behavioral concerns in schools. She goes on to state, internalized racism, defined as the beliefs and value systems affected by racism that guide our everyday behavior, is so pervasive that at a very young age, Black children began to question their beauty, strength, and sense of belonging. This is not because Black children are inherently different, but because of how other people and systems treat them. Growing up, the things I was told by some of my white teachers and administrators left me feeling inadequate, unworthy, dumb, like I didn't belong, and caused my self-esteem to plummet. As a result, I became suicidal by the time I was in high school. This beautiful diamond I was so proud of my ring. I wore it to school, showed my friends, and suddenly I was accused of stealing. There was a white girl in my class. She had the same ring, apparently. Of course, it came out of a bubblegum machine, so how many of the same rings could there be, right? So she told my second grade teacher that I stole her ring. And I told my second grade teacher that I did not steal her ring, and she could ask my sister for herself. My sister was retrieved and brought to our classroom. When she was in the room, the girl proceeded to tell her story about how that was her ring, and that she had bought the ring and that I stole the ring from her. And I said, she's lying. To that, my teacher slapped me in my face, in front of my sister. I was devastated. She later apologized, but the damage had been done. Another experience I recall from my elementary school years was the blatant disrespect from my elementary school president. He couldn't stand me. And the reason he didn't like me was because I was a student who was different. I was not into the public school program, and I spoke against the injustices I saw and experienced unapologetically. One year for our annual school program, we were taught to sing the song. It went like this. Mr. Sally, the boss of the school. Mr. Sally, you know you cool. Mr. Sally, the boss of the school. I wasn't feeling it. Number one, I'm not an advocate for bosses, as it sends a message that one person is superior to another. Secondly, Mr. Sally had been disrespectful to me on so many occasions. I was not about to lie and call him cool. So at the concert, I sang my own version of the song. It went like this. Mr. Sally's not the boss of the school. Mr. Sally, you know you're a fool. Mr. Sally's not the boss of the school. This infuriated my teacher and Mr. Sally. My mother figure, myself, and the school social worker were summoned to Mr. Sally's office to discuss my behavior. Mr. Sally started with, I don't like your daughter. To which I responded, I don't like you either. My mother figure was not happy about my response. She said, don't say that. The school social worker, who was also melanated, said, to be fair, he is the adult, and he came at her first with, he didn't like her. That's right. My mother figure rebutted, yes, I understand, but she is a child, and it's not her place to correct him. That is my place, as he and I are both adults. I somewhat agree with my mother figure, because coming up, we were told to stay in the child's place. If an adult got out of sorts with us, we would report to our parents, who would deal with them accordingly. I could say a lot about this, but I will refrain from now. Throughout my elementary school and middle school years, I was told that I was bad, and I was not like the other students. By the time I was high school, I was tamed, and had learned to stay to myself and be quiet, so that I wouldn't get in trouble for expressing my truth. In high school, I was asked by one of my teachers, what do you want to do when you get out of high school? I said, proudly, I want to be a lawyer. A lawyer? My teacher asked. She gave a loud, outrageous laugh and said, the only thing black kids can do when they graduate from high school is get a job at a fast food restaurant. So stop dreaming, honey. I took what she said to heart. After all, the only students getting called to the counselor's office to discuss their life path and college opportunities post-secondary were white students. Counselors didn't call melanated students out of class to talk about these things, at least from what I saw. Well, my sister, who was 2 years older than me, graduated from high school. Her melanated voice teacher got her an audition to be in the choir at a historically black college. Her audition went well, and she went away. to this HBCU. This was not something I understood or could even conceive in my mind. I just looked at it as she went away to go sing, because my perception about melanated students attending college was that that was not an option. A few months before graduating from high school, my father asked me, "So, what are you going to do when you graduate from high school?" My response was, "I'm going to get a job at a fast food restaurant and chill." I said it so proudly. He said, "Oh, no, you're not. You're going to college or you're getting out of here." My mind was twisted. I didn't even know anything about college. How am I going to go to college? I said to my father, "I don't know the first thing about college." He said, "You better call your sister and find out how you can go where she is." Well, options didn't look so great. As my father said, I was either going to college or getting out of his house. Since I didn't have anywhere to go, college was the only option. So my journey began. My sister spoke with the chair over the music department, who secured me a band audition, and I received a band scholarship. This was a surprise to me, because in high school, my band teacher always talked down to me and told me I was a horrible flautist. The white girl who came in the year after replaced me as the first chair, and I was moved to the third chair. But in college, I quickly moved the ranks in band. Freshman year, me and my cohort Tim both won Freshman of the Year. The band director said we were head to head. So for the first time in the history of the school, 2 people were selected to receive the award, which was a big thing. My sophomore year, Tim and I became the section leaders of our sections. This was also the first in the history of our university. I was so confused by these achievements because I was always told that I was a horrible flautist in high school. Hence, why I was never allowed to play the piccolo. The piccolo was reserved for the first chairs only, my high school band teacher would say. In college, though, I became a gosh dang piccolo player. Back to the situation of going to college. I didn't know the first thing about college. My mentor told me to take up computer science, as that was the next big wave that was going to take over the world. When I got to college, the college didn't offer computer science, so I was back to the drawing board. My sister was a music major, so I settled with that and became a music major. I quickly discovered that I would not thrive as a music major, as I found many of my teachers on my music track were not sufficient enough to help me learn what I needed to learn concerning my major. So I became an English major, and the rest is history. The things I experienced in the education system growing up were not isolated incidents. Melanated students all over the world are still having these types of experiences. What I can say about these experiences is they left me broken, unsure of who I was and what my potential was. Feeling rejected, not worthy, unloved, hating myself, lacking self-esteem, and not having a sense of self-worth. It also didn't help that I experienced molestation and physical abuse as a child. My mental health was attacked. In my freshman year of college, I was suicidal. Therefore, I was made to go to counseling with the school psychologist. This was a condition that my college put in place for me to continue attending the university. I was opposed to attending counseling, but since it was a condition I had to complete to continue attending college, I went. It actually turned out in my favor because the school psychologist, Dr. Dolores Lytle, became my mother away from home. She was patient, honest, and stern. She helped me process through my childhood trauma and helped me get through some of the darkest days of my life. To this, I owe her so much thanks and gratitude. May she rest in peace. I've shared with you the traumatic experiences that I had while navigating the educational system. But to take a deeper dive into the subject, let's start by looking at the toxic effect the zero tolerance policy has on melanated students. In 1994, the Gun-Free Schools Act was passed. From this act came the zero tolerance policy, which is considered to be one of the most controversial areas in education. The primary focus of the act was to crack down on students who were found to be in possession of drugs or weapons on school property, according to the National Association of Secondary School Principals. However, principals across the U.S. have weaponized this policy, making the melanated students the target of inequitable disciplinary measures. Emily Peterson, author of the article, Racial Inequality in Public School Discipline for Black Students in the United States, makes some alarming statements about the inequality Black students experience in the public and private schools in regard to discipline. I will get to this in a moment, but first I want to share with you a statement Emily made about how education is portrayed. According to Emily Peterson, and I quote, "Education is often portrayed as a doorway to opportunity and a way of teaching you to appreciate social behavior to make them productive citizens. In school, students are expected to exhibit certain behaviors that preserve specific societal values and customs, thus accomplishing the goals of education." She goes on to say, school disciplinary measures such as in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension, expulsion, referral to law enforcement, and school-related arrests attempt to discourage serious misbehavior and create a positive, safe learning environment for all students. While these measures have the potential to do good, it is common to see disciplinary measures taken to the extreme in both force and frequency. In these instances, discipline can also negatively impact the academic performance and future employment opportunities of the students who receive the discipline. Furthermore, Emily states, although zero tolerance policies were intended to target violent or criminal activities, many school administrators have adopted these policies and implemented them in situations that are rare or more subjective, to include disrespect and disrupting class. Here are some statistics Emily shares to back her claim. In 2013 through 2014, Black students were 4 times more likely to experience an out-of-school suspension than their white peers, and 3 times more likely than their Latin peers. Black students were also over 2 times more likely to be referred to the principal's office. Though research shows that Black children are not more likely to misbehave than white children, Black students, especially Black male students, are much more likely to encounter stronger disciplinary measures for the same offenses as their white peers. Multiple studies imply Black students do not commit more misbehaviors than white students, and the disparity in suspension rates is not fully comprehensible. To substantiate the statistics Emily shared, let's look at a statement made by the American Psychological Association. According to the American Psychological Association, research demonstrates that Black students are more likely to be suspended or expelled, have less opportunities to be placed in gifted programs, and their teachers tend to have lower expectations for them than they have for their white students. This is what I call racism at its peak. Mental Health of America states, racism is a mental health issue because racism causes trauma, and trauma paints a direct line to mental illnesses, which need to be taken seriously. Now that we talked about the zero tolerance policies and how they impact melanated students, let's talk about the effects racism has on the melanated student. An article written by Greta Anderson titled The Emotional Toll of Racism shared that melanated students are continuously on the defense due to experiences of racism which bear emotional scars and can result in elevated levels of anxiety and poor mental health outcomes. The racism in which Ms. Anderson is speaking of shows up as things like what I outlined in the beginning of this podcast. Zero tolerance policies in school, which allow schools to create excuses to give melanated students extended out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. Police officers in the schools policing the melanated students instead of protecting them. School policies and dress codes resulting in melanated students being put out of school based on their clothes and or their natural hairstyles. Take these four situations as an example or as examples. In 2018, Faith Finity, an 11-year-old African-American who lived in Louisiana, was sent home by her private school because the administration of the school said her braided hair extensions violated school rules. In 2019, Andrew Johnson, a New Jersey high school wrestler, was ordered to cut his locks off before a wrestling match to be able to compete. How outrageous. In 2020, 12-year-old Vanessa Van Dyke, while attending a private school in Florida, was being bullied at school because of her natural hair. As a result, the school administration deemed her hair a distraction, and therefore the school ordered that the student cut her hair or be expelled. In 2023, Daryl George, a junior at a high school in Texas, was put out of school for his natural hairstyle. Have you ever heard of white students being put out of school for their hairstyle? Not. These situations and circumstances are widespread in the education system, as a great majority of classroom teachers are white women who fear melanated children, have low expectations for these students, feel threatened by these students, and cannot relate to the culture of these students. Amanda Cowell, a child psychiatrist who authored the Time magazine article titled How Racism Affects the Mental Health of Black Youth, shares, anti-Black racism is fueling the mental health crisis of youth. The impact racism has on Black youth is enormous, and the health system does not have the capacity to address the matter. Racism can lead to depression and even lead to suicidal effects. The rate at which Black children and adolescents are suffering from mental health issues is alarming. The number of Black children committing suicide is increasing faster than any other racial or ethnic group. Black children as young as 5 years old are 1.8 times more likely to commit suicide compared to their white peers. In this article, Ms. Calhoun shared 3 encounters she had experienced with melanated youth who were negatively impacted by racism. The first is a kindergartner who withdrew and was sad for weeks because her white classmates said her skin was too dark to play with them. The second was a 4th grader who no longer wanted to live because her white neighbors told her that her Black skin was ugly. The third was an affluent African-American high school student who attempted suicide because she was ostracized by her peers and received excessive punishment from her teachers at her predominantly white prep school. These students are among the many melanated students who experience depression and/or suicidal thoughts as a result of their experiences of systemic racism. Dr. Arlene, a member of the National Academy of Medicine and a professor in the School of Public Health and Research, states, when melanated children are consistently put in situations that trigger their survival mode approach to life and situations, this can cause weathering. Weathering causes damage to the human body that can affect individuals down to the cellular level throughout their growth and development as they navigate a systemically and historically racist, classist, stigmatizing, and xenophobic society. The results of weathering can lead to problems with the cardiovascular, neuroendocrine, immune, and metabolic body systems that make those who are susceptible to weathering due to experiencing systemic racism at risk of dying at a young age from infectious disease or chronic diseases like hypertension. Imagine being a child going to school, scared of the teachers, the police in the schools, the administrators at the school, and still being expected to learn and excel. Imagine the level of stress that puts on a child and how that impacts his or her psyche. Have you ever been fearful of something or someone? Do you remember that pain in your chest, that lump in your throat, those sweaty palms? It was an experience that you want to relive 5 days out of the week, was it? Or is it? So why do we put our children in this situation? Take a moment to step into your child's shoes and feel what they feel. When was the last time you sat down and had a heart-to-heart with your child about the school they attend? If you haven't, I encourage you to do so today. This is important. Just because your child has not voiced any concerns to you does not mean they don't have them. Here are some questions you can ask when you talk to them about their school. 1. How do you feel about the student scene in the school you attend? 2. What has been your experiences with the teachers in your school? 3. How does the principal communicate with the students? 4. When you are in class, do you feel like you are learning what you need to learn? Next, have you ever had a fight or an argument at school? If yes, what happened? How did that make you feel? Lastly, do you feel like you are accepted by the students and teachers at your school? These are open-ended questions and should be used as a guide. They are designed to allow you to have a conversation with your child without leading the conversation. There is a difference between asking your child, how does the principal communicate with the students? Versus, how does the principal communicate with the students? Does she come into the classroom, make announcements over the loudspeaker, etc.? The first question is not a leading question, whereas the second question is a leading question because you are giving the child choices to pick from when asking the question. I want to wrap this podcast up by sharing this excerpt about the impact of emotional and psychological stress, written in a collaborative work produced by Lawrence Robinson, Melinda Smith, and Dr. J.C. I quote, "Extremely stressful experiences that break your sense of security and leave you feeling helpless in a frightening environment can cause emotional and psychological trauma. This trauma can lead to persistent, uncomfortable memories or feelings, anxiety, numbness, disconnection, and a loss of trust in other people. Even though there is no physical danger involved, trauma can arise from any circumstance that makes you feel helpless and alone. Your subjective emotional experience of an incident determines whether or not an experience is traumatic, not the actual conditions. Situations that make you feel terrified or powerless are catalysts for trauma. End quote. The racism in the school system, be it public or private, is traumatizing for melanated students. As a parent of a melanated child, you have the authority to put your child in a better situation that nourishes and cultivates their higher level of consciousness and enables them to win in education and in life. With that, I'm signing off. The choice of who educates your scholar or scholars is you and your scholar's choice. Make the choice to do what you know and feel is in their best interest. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Peace, love, and light.